everybody. Welcome to our very first week together here on the bridge. My name is Julia Schneider. I'll be your facilitator for the next 9 weeks. It was such a joy getting to know each of you and these little glimpses and snippets from your stories on the name game. Thank you all for your detailed compassion and attention to each other's stories. There will be a few more stragglers joining our group. Last I checked, we had 14 people still registered. So please do check back in the name game to meet and connect with your classmates through their name stories as well. I feel like this is such a great exercise to get started with because not only does it introduce us to each other and inform us what to call each other, it really tells us a little bit about who we are, our unique origins and destinations as a group. For example, we come from justice tempered by mercy and little towns in England, likely west of a brook. From grandmothers who make us queens and fathers who remind us of magic. From lime fields and Spanish colonizers and geometry teachers with thick Greek accents. From birthdays and feast days and days of the week. From maiden names and married names and should we call them bachelor names? And interesting combinations of all of the above. From sounds and preferences and feelings that just won't stick no matter how long we try. From countries we've never seen, people we've never met. From genetic families and chosen families, travel and movement, attachments and refusals to attach. So as you can tell from these little quotes and paraphrasings of our beautiful reflective writing exercises, our names color the way that we experience the world and they inform the way that we navigate it. And deeper still, our names are always changing. So if we can agree that, like our names, our identities are constantly evolving composites of our history, of our memories, of our experiences, then surely this matters to healthcare and to pain care in general. After all, pain is a lived experience and something that can only be communicated through story. There is no blood test, there's no thermometer that can tell another provider or another person what you're experiencing. The extent of your pain. Only you can tell them that. Pain is itself more than just an issue in the tissue. It's a composite of experiences, expectations, anxieties, even desires, very much like identity that we'll only understand if we know how to really listen. And yet, healthcare providers so rarely get training in listening. Most of the time, we think we're already good at it. We work with people one-on-one. We are very skilled at taking intake forms and listening for things like symptoms. But I'm hoping that in the course of our next 9 weeks together, we'll think of listening as something a lot more complex, a lot more dynamic, and a lot more relational than just ticking off boxes on an intake form. In fact, if you learn anything at all here, I hope it's that there's always something more to be interested in, something more to be curious about. Listening is not a skill that can be achieved. It's not a line on your CV. It's a practice, and this is a community of practice. So this week we'll begin our practice together with the foundation of narrative medicine called close reading. And close reading is really just a practice of listening. I know everyone here has already done their introductory reading for the course, and you probably know a little bit about close reading from high school or college, but let me take this opportunity to break it down in, I think, much simpler terms than you're probably familiar with. Close reading teaches us how to listen by teaching us how to pay attention. That's all it is. In a close reading exercise, you'll notice that you have to slow down, that you have to start to hold words, concepts, ideas up to the light to examine all of their facets, all their potential meanings, and to watch the way that the language we speak actually becomes our perspective. So forget the notion from your high school or college English class that there is a right way to close read or a right way to interpret art at all. There is a school of thought that says we should be reading for what the author intended. But here in narrative medicine, we're going to suggest that meaning is actually a collaboration between the text and the reader. So in this space, there's a lot of room for multiple interpretations to exist, as long as those interpretations are grounded in the material details of the text. We'll be talking about that in greater detail as the course goes on. So if you already are familiar with any of these these stories or texts or artworks that we're going to be looking at together, I invite you to forget what you know, just see it with fresh eyes. The only rule here is to listen, to truly listen to what a storyteller is saying. So to do this, we'll be sure to ground our observations in the details of a text, noting words, images, tenses, tones, all the minutiae that collaborate to inform meaning. This kind of attentive listening to a source is what we mean when we say close reading. We may all land on conflicting or different interpretations, but as long as we are grounding our observations in the story itself, there is plenty of room for these interpretations to coexist. In fact, I think that's what makes art a complex, interesting, and beautiful reflection of what it is to be human. So a little bit about how to set up for close reading. I set up for close reading a lot like I set up for meditation. Find a quiet space, few distractions, and then take out a pen and read actively. Circle words that call your attention, underline sentences, ask questions in the margins. And then as you come back for a second, maybe even third and fourth read, you might see if you can answer those questions in the margins or if new questions present themselves. Every time you read, you should come away with something new if you're reading actively, attentively, and curiously. Do read more slowly than you think you'll need to. You'll be surprised what patterns start to emerge from the text and what concepts are still revealing themselves to you. As you work on the text, you will notice that it is working on you back. This is something we're going to be talking a little bit more about later on in the week during our reflective writing exercise when we have an opportunity to cross-pollinate our stories with the story that we're going to be reading. So after close reading, you may find yourself with more questions than answers, which means you're doing it right. Good job. Close reading does tend to thicken stories, complicating them by revealing multiple possible meanings or interpretations. So conclusions that might have seemed easy or pat after a surface level read might not be so neat after a deeper engagement. So as we'll discover in the diversity of our interpretations, a good story always has lots of room for these multiple understandings to coexist, as long as those understandings are rooted in the material details themselves. I know this is getting a little repetitive, but this is something that you're going to see a lot as I interact with your comments on the boards. One question I'll constantly be asking is, where do you see this in the text? What evidence do you have for this opinion in the text? So this is not just willy-nilly, whatever goes. We're always going to be grounding our observations in the material details themselves. So this week, as you interact with patients or even loved ones, family members, if you're not in healthcare, anything in your personal or professional life, I invite you to notice the space between listening and responding. What shifts in you as a listener as you attend differently to their stories? If you'd like, you can post your reflections in the learning journal on the side of the page here. There's no obligation, but it is a place to track how these lessons are shaping your writing and thinking, which can be a really valuable tool for tracking your own progress. Responses to each other's posts are optional as well. A quick housekeeping note. I won't be commenting on everyone's posts like I did with the name game. My role here is less teacher and more facilitator. My goal is to kind of insert myself in your in your conversations and noting or highlighting any differences or similarities between observations, asking pesky questions that keep your observations grounded in the text itself. So let's practice together now. Let's start with some close reading with Sandra Cisneros, 11. It's a story that I love from an author I love. I hope you'll love her too. If you have any questions or suggestions over these next 9 weeks together as we feel our way through this course, please always reach out to me by text or by email. I'm here and ready for it anytime you want to chat. I really can't wait to read more of your gorgeous stories and get to know you all better as these weeks go on. I look forward to seeing you next time.